Welcome to the energies of the new moon in Vedic Capricorn and Tropical Aquarius, 21st of January, a Saturday, where we are celebrating this balsamic energy, the new moon effort to overcome the inertia of the past, right? And we've got the big players, the transpersonal planets, Pluto, Uranus, especially Saturn, heavily impacting this new moon, and actually Venus conjunct Saturn, the kind of youthful, luxury-loving, pleasure-seeking, hedonistic young woman coming up to Father Time. And there's an innate sort of conflict there. It would seem, with the love of pleasure of life and the duty, responsibility, and constriction that comes with maturity. So, I mean, that's really a great metaphor for everything that's going on right now. As we, as humans, not the only creatures on the planet, but we like to pretend we are sometimes, coming into conflict with our duties, responsibilities, and larger purpose on the earth. It's not small topic time, right? We all know that there's been a lot of pressure building for a very long time concerning right relation, how we treat the planet, ourselves, each other. I mean, these things are known to us, and there's a reckoning coming. A lot of people like to spend their time in denial of that reckoning, and that's because there's a certain level of powerlessness that we feel right now. I think that's just because what's in front of us, what's ahead of us, will protect us, because we are young, dumb, and naive, right? We are a very young species on a very old planet in a very large solar system that we barely understand. So it's normal that we don't exactly have our poop in a group. This pathway spread, however, is a druidic spread for overall clarity. I like to do this one at the new moons for you guys, and then I'm going to go do the I Ching for myself, for my personal study after this. And I might write about that later, but I definitely will have an astrosomatics class for you later today. This will help us to discover the limits and the purposes of the cycle. And I'm going to especially look out for the North Node, or the Rahu, in these cards, because we're dealing with a demonic influence of greed. This is not surprising to anyone else either, but the influence of Rahu, as it is in relationship to Saturn, especially in the Vedic chart of this moon, really tells me that we're all going to be struggling a bit with the tendency to want to hoard and keep things for ourselves, when we all kind of know that the real reason we're going through this struggle is because we don't share well. I mean, come on. It's a kindergarten lesson, and we need to get it straight. We're making it take far too long. So how can we get our pathway more secured is definitely the object of my meditation for this full moon. At the balsamic moon, we pull inward and we look toward what we need to align, orient, and bring toward the future. Everything else needs to be left behind. So the past is the first card of the Druidic spread. And this one is Bear. The somnambulant card, the dream time. The very first line of the blog post that I just put up is a quote from Judith Lassiter, and she says, "The purpose of the universe is not to make us happy, it's to wake us up." This is the dreaming card. The bear in its long hibernation, reprocessing urea, understanding the way to stay asleep. No longer an option. This is the past. Beautiful first card. We thank you, Ursa. The second card is our present moment, and this is one of those that we need to give a little attention to. This is the elk. The elk card represents stamina, and if you hang out with me or you take any of my classes, you know one of the things that I'm very fond of saying is that this is a marathon. It is not a sprint. This is not a test. It's 80 years at best. And you have to decide, I'm sorry, but you do. You have to decide where you're going to fall on the spectrum of life force. Are you going to keep going? Are you going to maintain your stamina and do what you need to support your body, mind, and spirit in that? Or are you going to give in to the Rajasic and Tamasic tendencies that pull you into inertia and drag you back to sleep? So these two are the opposite ends of the polarity, right? Either you're going to endure or you're going to fall back to sleep. And it's okay to fall asleep. It's okay to have a mulligan lifetime if that's what you want to have. Don't they call it a mulligan in golf? But why? You know, stay on track, stay on task, stay on purpose. Maintain what you need, the self-care that you need in order to keep going in the presence, because your endurance counts. It matters. We can't do this without your part. Every single one of us is absolutely essential to what's going on here. The third card is the future card, and this one is skunk, reputation. It's ego too. You know, if you're, the line I remember from when I learned these cards decades ago. Decades. Is if your ego is not your amigo, you know it stinks. And that is so this new moon. It's all about getting out of the I, me, mine mentality. And I really believe, and I could be wrong, I've been wrong before, there was that time in 1985. But I've been wrong before, and it could be that, you know, people who are seeking to hoard and keep things just for themselves, resources just for themselves, get off scot-free. But it looks like with Saturn moving into Aquarius, the reckoning is coming for that. In Vedic astrology, Saturn and Rahu, the North Node, the symbol of greed, the headless demon without a stomach, no satiety, that animal eats and eats and eats and is never full, right? Are coming into conflict. And that's the same thing within us, right? The conflict of the ego that wants to assert itself, that wants to have too much more than enough to sustain its larger duties to the ecosystem, to the planet, to the others in its life, in confrontation with duty and dharma and knowing what's right, because we all do. We all know, and we've known since kindergarten and even before that we need to share the resources on a finite earth. Beautiful card of reckoning for the future position. Now, in the energies that are working to move lessons through our consciousness right now, the ideas that we need to be able to take on new information, the innovative Uranian, Promethean sort of ideas, we have Otter. You can't make this stuff up. This is feminine energy. And Richard Tarnas, who wrote the book Cosmos and Psyche, has said famously that the patriarchy is the 6,000-year birth canal of the Great Mother Goddess. These energies that have been underrepresented and exploited for more than 6,000 years, right? It doesn't take a patriarchy to exploit women. We're vulnerable. We have children with us. We're easy to pick off. We're soft, defenseless in a lot of cases. This energy is it's what we're learning to grapple with collectively, is that the receptive and not the expressive energy needs to be respected. It needs to have a place in the society that's not just utter exploitation. Now, this goes beyond gender. This is literally the Tao, the yin and the yang. The expressive and the receptive energies are two parts of a single whole. And when we look at things holistically, we don't exploit one half of the circle, because we realize you can't have wholeness without it. And wholeness is the way you see beyond boundary and the way you see beyond the limitations that Saturn will continue to bring up to us as karma until we learn the lesson. So the lessons moving through right now at this point in our pathway are, how do we assimilate, integrate, and restore, remediate this receptive energy? How can we make a space in our world for people who don't want to have to go out there and hustle? Why should they be any less respected, loved, included if they want to stay home and make a house beautiful, or build a family, or tend a garden, or remediate the earth, clean a waterway? Why should that work be worth less than entrepreneurship and these multi-conglomerate, they're monopolies, let's face it. Is that more valuable to us than the earth and nature itself? God, I hope not. I mean, it's starting to look that way, I'm not going to lie, but still, there's time to turn back from that. The lessons of the past, what came before, lessons that we're moving on from right now, are represented in this spread by transformation, the butterfly card. And we think about this animal as it moves from caterpillar to chrysalis to butterfly, right? There's a caterpillar soup in the middle, and it's really informative to think of that COVID period as that kind of caterpillar soup, right? It was something that we had to come through. And thankfully, some of us are still here. But emerging on the other side of that with the lessons that we've learned, and it means that particular point in time and what happened there means different things to different people. I'm not trying to tell you how you should think about it at all, but I am saying that is that transformation where we were before COVID and where we are now with the pandemic. Those are important lessons to carry with us. What did you gather personally from that period in time? We all learned how to move forward with less. We're all leaner, hungrier, more desperate for truth. And we're all very aware that truth is very difficult to come by here in the Kali Yuga. That's our past lesson. Now, what's working for us in all of this? We've seen a bit of that Rahu in these tamasic cards, right? The sleep and inertia of the dream time. There's information and there's energy there, though, and it can be useful toward helping us to wake up. The negative force of an overdeveloped ego, which hoards and wants to keep everything for itself. That is here. Rahu is represented, but the endurance of Saturn, the receptive energy of Venus, and she also helps us to transform with Saturn in a way that respects and honors self and others. That's what we're really missing. That energy of live and let live. The respect that we used to have for each other, not trying to force anyone to do anything. And letting people enjoy freedom. What's working for that? Boundaries. Armadillo. This animal can curl up and become absolutely impenetrable with an armor-like skin. It decides what it lets in and what it doesn't. And taking those lessons that we got from the pandemic, from the last 2 years of Saturn's transit in Capricorn, right? It almost started like to the minute that planet moved in. We got the shutdown in Wuhan. So taking care of self, I mean, that's one of the big lessons of Armadillo and these boundaries that we need to take on. Also, ego. Healthy ego is about boundaries. Unhealthy ego is about letting everything outside of you affect you to a detrimental degree, to the point where you're so distracted by what's outside that you vacate and abandon what's inside. And that leads people into addiction and demonic possession by tamasic inertial forces. Healthy boundaries, y'all. If you don't have them, get them. They're really important. And I think that's no secret, right? Going forward into 2023, you want to know where you end and someone else's ideology begins. Get a plan, or you become part of someone else's plan, is what the boundary card says to me. Now, what's working against us, what's dragging us backwards toward this COVID, Capricorn, Saturn area? The Akashic Record. Whale represents our collective past. And just as we said at the beginning of this reading, the effort to overcome the inertia of the past, to discover the limits and the purpose of the cycle outside our previous way of thinking. Oh my gosh, this is so difficult to overcome. We need a lot of self-compassion. We need a lot of receptive energy. We need to wake up to the fact that we need the kind of self-care that only comes from boundaries and healthy ego. And we need to commit to enduring the process, to coming to the end of these lessons of the past, these lessons of violence and power and greed, and coming back to the beginning, the innocent beginning of sharing. It's a perfect message, so I don't want to add too much to that. In the Akashic Record is everything that we have ever done collectively and individually. And overcoming all of that is what's working against us. It's what's dragging us back. We need to find a way to look at the world with new eyes. And in the first couple of days after this new moon, we're not going to be able to find that very easily. And there may be a lot of fear, and there may be quite a bit of tamasic energy still remaining, because we have to deal with that. We each have to deal with it individually. And I have no doubt that we will. But over the next 3 months, all of the planets. Tomorrow, Uranus will go direct, and that'll be all of them. Mars is out of retrograde. Mercury's out of retrograde. So as we move forward into the next 3 months, we'll really begin to gain positive momentum forward. But use this time, use the dark of the moon to get yourself aligned, get yourself oriented, know what matters to you. If you're thinking about causes, larger structures, universal desires, that's an excellent way to orient yourself. What do you want for the world? Not what do you want for yourself, right? That's about a healthy ego and healthy boundaries. And receptive energy, like the moon does for us. At this point in the solar cycle, she's communing with the sun and talking with him about what we as humanity, humankind, I prefer, need in order to be able to break away from our violent past and move forward into an egoless future where our reputation is as people who evolve and learn their lessons and mature instead of hanging out in this neotenous, permanent adolescence where we just try to take everything for the individual. Now, I like to look at the bottom card in the pathway spread just to see what an overall energy is and try to garner what the next 30 days can be wrapped up as, like a final statement. And for this one, it's squirrel. I think we got this last time too. Gathering. And this time when I look at this squirrel, what I'm getting is find the others. Find the people, like Timothy Leary said, find the people who represent the kind of future that you see within yourself. Not outside in the world, but within you. And that kind of individuation and bringing forward what's within you in the loving, caring presence of others who understand and know your goodness, your truth, and your beauty can only be gained by committing to a balanced ego, committing to being awake and aware, committing to follow through the transformation into your receptive energy, your vulnerability, gathering strength from receptivity to create the boundaries that protect that and move away from a violent past. And this is reminding me of that new Avatar too, and like its message of all of us, right? Animals, all living beings included in that somehow. We can't just keep tearing through the environment without boundaries. We can't just keep eating all the resources with a ravenous ego. We have to gather ourselves. We have to gather our maturity. We have to gather our endurance. And we have to learn the lessons of our transformation. To wake it up, baby. So excited for us. Happy New Year, everyone.